Welcome to the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast. My name is Benjamin Lewis. This week, Mark Dodich shares the story of his journey out of corporate career after corporate career and into a self-fulfilled, self-employed individual. This interview is one of my favorite interviews that I've done as part of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast. Mark's story of failure leading to success has inspired me. But enough about what I think. Let's get on with this interview with Mark Dodich.
Hi, my name's Mark Dodich. I'm a Libra. I was born in October 1953 from Canton, Ohio, near Lake Erie. Grew up in the Midwest, and once I graduated college, it was time to leave. Well, probably the giant thing is my father was a fireman, and when I was just before I was 5 years old, there was a gas mask failure, and he died in a basement and was brought back to life. He was one of the early test cases of, being dead and being brought back to life, and had to learn to do everything again. I mean, how to eat, how to tie his shoes, how to tie a tie. It taught me at a very early age that things can change instantaneously in life. It also taught me how strong as human beings we are, because personally I think I would have given up before having to relearn to do everything, even just tie my shoes. And so I really, at an early age, I saw the strength of what a human being is capable of doing. It was pretty amazing. But on another level, it taught me to learn that I have to do everything myself. So I'm kind of self-taught in everything I've done, because at that age, all the focus went on helping Dad in his rehabilitation. And I was first son in a Catholic family. So it was like, be responsible, you're the man now kind of a routine. And so, the good level is I learned how to do things on my own, and the bad level is it makes it a little harder to let other people in because, life changes instantaneously. Well, I started off like most people of my generation. Is you go to college, you load up on college loans, you get out and you get a job. So I started off in a very mainstream way. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. In those days was a very big steel town because associated with the auto industry, and I wanted nothing more than to get out of the steel business, because everyone worked in the steel business in one facet or another, and I just totally wanted out. But I was one of those kids that I had 3 majors by the time I had finished college. It took me 5 years to get through a 4-year degree, which is not uncommon for people. But I ended up in sociology, and in sociology, I love studying like those African tribes that they knew somebody was coming without a telephone, and they did all this miraculous healing and telepathy, and I thought, man, if I can study this in college, that's pretty amazing. And then I started studying these spiritualist groups, to see what they were about. And at that time, I was still pretty mainstream kind of guy. I mean, my mother used to go to psychics all the time, and I thought she was a nut job for doing that. And then my other world was the people who lived in the hard world of the steel industry, let's say. Anyways, the point is, in college, I started learning astrology, not at that time because of the love of astrology, but because some of the girls I knew were studying astrology, and so I wanted to hang out with the girls, college co-eds. And so the carrot on the stick for me to get into what I'm doing now was actually I just wanted to learn to hang out with the girls. So I kind of backed into it, is how I would say. But in hindsight, here I was studying these African tribes that did telepathy and healing, the spiritualist camps that were doing what these days we would call channeling. All of those roots of who I've become now were more in what we'll call the study or the hobby level in college, and I had no idea that it would ever lead to this. I mean, I graduated college and I went out and, put on a suit and, went to work. Well, my early career, I started off with the phone company. Interesting how life works. My grandfather had died and left me what I thought was a humongous inheritance. $1,700 in the early 1970s was a lot more than it is today. And it was like my stake in my future. And I wanted nothing more than to get out of Ohio. I just found it to be a boring place that didn't change at all, and there were no jobs. That was back when the original Japanese auto crunch hit, and unemployment was up around 20-some%. And the people I was competing with for jobs had 20 years experience, and I was fresh out of college. So not only did I want to move, but the circumstances really required that I did move. And not knowing what to do, I moved to Houston because Houston was a boom town. And was fortunate enough, I got a job in the marketing department at a Southwestern Bell Telephone, and that's the old days of the phone company when it was very different than it is now. And they trained me well, but through a long series of events, not to take you through the whole story, but I ended up as an aluminum salesman out of San Francisco. So I struggled to get out of Ohio to get out of the steel industry, and I ended up selling industrial sheet, plate, coil aluminum. And in astrology, steel is a very masculine metal and aluminum is a feminine metal. So I thought, I struggled my whole life to get out of Ohio and away from the steel industry, and I end up in this yin, or this feminine aluminum industry. So it was kind of amusing to see that kind of a circle go on in life. In that part of my life, but we'll call it post-college, I had these very, I can't describe it. It was this feeling like I have to go to such a place. And when I was in Houston, I felt very strongly that I needed to come up to the Pacific Northwest. And I had never been out west. At that point, Houston was the furthest west I had ever been. But I just had this incredible draw to go to Seattle. And now I got my pilot's license in college too. So flying was a big part. And Boeing is in Seattle, that kind of a feeling. Not that I ever ended up there, but I guess the story is I just had this incredible draw to go to the Northwest. And so I maneuvered as best I can to try to get a transfer from Southwestern Bell into what was called AT&T long lines. This was way back before the breakup, but just couldn't pull it off, and I just couldn't wait for the corporate bureaucracy anymore, so I just decided to make it happen myself. And that got me up to the Northwest, where I worked for a company called Olympic Stain. So I learned all about house paint I was an area manager is basically what I was doing. In those years, I moved around the country a lot. I went from Houston up to the Seattle area, got a job with Olympic Stain. I actually was starting to do astrology on a real rudimentary level. And I got promoted out to Colorado, and I got caught up in corporate politics out in corporate America in Colorado, and I just really didn't like it. And I decided, hey, I want to live by the ocean. So I moved out to San Francisco and lived out on the ocean there. And that's really where the whole metaphysics and the astrology really took on a whole life of its own. I started meditating. So it was almost like I had two lives out here. One was the industrial salesman kind of a world, and on the side I was learning to meditate and take astrology classes and learn healing techniques and things like that. And even though it had been around me, the interesting story is in that corporate world, in those days, I used to drink a lot, go out with your clients, and, those were the days where you had a pretty nice expense account. So, going out to the finest restaurants with your clients, drinking all night, and it was that kind of a lifestyle. And I was getting tired of that lifestyle. It was hard on my body. It just didn't resonate with me anymore. So I thought, I have to find a different way to do some things. So I got one of the metaphysical papers in the Bay Area and found a place that was having a day-long workshop by some guy on crystals. And what I didn't tell you earlier, my first major in college was geology. And so I love rocks. I just didn't like digging around in rocks looking for fossils. And where I went to college originally was very tied to the oil business, which wasn't really my thing, being a Kent State liberal, from those days. And so, just on lark to just avoid going out drinking, I just went out and took a workshop. And I'm a pretty skeptical guy. You have to kind of, I'm from Missouri, you have to kind of prove it to me kind of a language. And, so we had all these giant crystals and we were laying them out in patterns and doing this crystal healing. And I'm still there, yeah, I don't know if I believe this stuff or not. And then everybody went and took a break, the lunch break. And I came back and snuck back early and laid in one of the patterns where there was nobody around watching me or that. And I could feel it, And I wouldn't say that I am the most feel it kind of a guy, okay? So with that, it was like I was hooked. I thought, oh, this works, because there was nobody around and I could still feel it. And I knew it wasn't my ego. It wasn't, it wasn't somebody trying to talk me into something. I could feel it. And from there, I was sold. And then how life snowballs on you. One thing leads to another. I became a business manager for a psychic down in the Bay Area. And I was still selling aluminum during the day. And at night, I was becoming this business manager and helping her set up lectures and do her advertising and promotion because I had the business background. So I got into the metaphysical world quite a bit, number one, through not wanting to drink as much as I used to in the old party days, shall we call it. And number two, I use my business skills as part of that world. So if you allow the universe to help you, I always joke when I get out of my own way, the world works better. You're kind of led to where you naturally need to be. And so I got into the whole metaphysics things by being a business manager for a psychic. So it taught me a lot of the basic skills, and I could help her with what she couldn't do, which was the business side. And she helped me with the metaphysical side. And I even took one of her tarot classes. And by the end of the first class, I was doing readings for everybody else. And I'd never done anything like that before. It was just, I had this innate, it just worked. It's like something that you know how to do that you didn't know you knew how to do. It was one of those kind of things.
We're over halfway through the first season of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast, and I'm looking to make a few changes for the next season. The biggest change I'm looking to make is I'd like to have all of the interviews focused around a specific theme. What would you as the audience of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast like to hear as the focus, the theme of the interviews for season 2? Would you like to hear about craftsmanship, or maybe living your dream, self-employment? It's up to you. There are many avenues you can use to contact me and let me know what you'd like to hear in the future. You can shoot me an email, suggestions@curmudgeoncafe.net, on Twitter @curmudgeoncafe. You can send us a message on Facebook, or even leave a comment on one of the videos on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Now let's get back to our interview with Mark Dodich.
So in San Francisco, I had a pretty large territory that took me as far as Alaska. And what I didn't tell you about the college years earlier was that I wanted to go to Alaska desperately from Ohio. But I had gotten in trouble. We had been doing little drugs, and I wrecked my car, and one of those growing up lessons in life in college, and had to buy this beat up old ratty pickup truck. And I knew it wouldn't go to Alaska, so that's how I got to Houston from Ohio. But my dream was to go to Alaska, and it just seemed like, I'm going to have to give up on the dream. Well, when I was in San Francisco, they gave Alaska to me as part of my sales territory. So I got to go to Alaska on the company's dime. So here's this dream 9 years later being realized through no effort on my own. that a dream I had given up on came back to me. And my customer, I had set up a manufacturing facility for mini blinds up there, which is kind of part of the aluminum business. And they ran into problems up there, and the owners of the company hired me to come up and be the manager of the company. And if I stayed for 3 years and made them X amount of dollars, I would become 1/3 owner of the business. So here I'm a young guy in my early 30s being offered my own business if I would move to Alaska, and it was a business I had set up for these people out of the Bay Area. So here is this dream that got realized from 9 years earlier that was never going to happen, and the universe drew me to that. And I will tell you, when I got there, talk about timing being perfect, I met the friends I would have like in the first week I was there, and I still to this day, I mean, this was the mid-1980s. I still have many of those friends from those days, even though we've all scattered in many different directions. So, I learned you don't give up on your dreams. Sometimes your dreams just come looking for you, and you have to be patient and wait for them rather than, when I was a college kid, it was like, I got to make this happen. And here, it was impossible. My situation was, it was just impossible for that dream to happen. And 9 years later, the universe plopped me into Alaska. They gave me a real nice job, a real nice opportunity. And so you never want to give up on your dreams. It's just they sometimes have to come to you instead of you going to them. Yeah, the timeline was confused in those years. I moved.
Like you traveled a lot.
In the United States, I traveled a lot, and it was, for the most part, it was traveling for, like I got promoted from Seattle out to Colorado, and I got hired from San Francisco up to Alaska. And, Alaska is one of those places that really helps you grow up in the world. And you can hear stories from anybody who moved up there as to how they got up there and what went on. And, when I was there, I found the woman who I thought was the woman of my dreams, which of course turned out to be an illusion. And I just had this very strong draw that I needed to go to Washington, D.C. So, I had this dream of going to Washington, D.C. My illusion surrounding the perfect woman for me, for my life, popped and was never going to come back again. And, Alaska is a pretty small place for as big as it is, because in the winter you're closed in with the mountains and the water, and the sky is over top of you. And then you're devastated on, the relationship of your life was an illusion. And so I had just this total draw to go to Washington, D.C., and I ended up there. The amusing part is I'm basically on the liberal side of the fence if I were going to fall off of it. And so I go to Washington, D.C., and I get a job selling scientific valves and fittings, like very technical plumbing type stuff. And one of my main customers was the Naval Surface Warfare organization in D.C. And I thought, here I am helping the Navy build weapons, and I am a Kent State liberal. I was just graduating from high school when people got shot at Kent State over the whole Vietnam War thing. And I think, oh man, here I am selling to these very companies that I was protesting against a few years earlier. And that taught me some very good lessons, because the people at the Naval Warfare Center were some of the nicest people you would ever want to meet. And at the same time, that's when the whole AIDS thing was going on. They were trying to come up with a cure with AIDS. So the way they do it in our corporate world is they go out and they hire all these companies to create AIDS, and spend billions of dollars on it. Then they spend millions of dollars finding companies to try and cure AIDS. It's a big money market racket. And I actually found that the medical profession that I dealt with in that whole time of AIDS were not what I would call the nicest people. And see, my illusion was, medical profession, nice, war people, not nice. Well, what an illusion that was, because I found out that I met some of the nicest people in the weapons business. and anyways, it burst what I thought was true in this life that I had been holding on to. But I was there during the Oliver North trial. Anyways, what an interesting time to be in Washington, D.C. was for the Oliver North trial. And, because I had these big judgments on, Oliver North and the Iran-Contra affair and the whole Panama Noriega thing that I, was living at that time in the thick of the politics. And I could see why they did some of the things they did, just having to deal with the bureaucracy of the government and how to get things passed through. You had to use side channels, because even just to order a chair, you would have to, in Washington, D.C., you'd have to order a chair from Columbus, Ohio, and it would take you a year to get it. I mean, that's how the government worked at that time, probably still does. And so I learned why all these people were doing back channel deals. It was survival, So I had a lot of my illusions about what I thought the world was about and my judgments on it. And if there's one thing it taught me is you really need to suspend judgments in this life, because as we get into the astrology conversation here, you just can't tell who a person is by what they do or how they appear, the clothes that they're wearing, and you just have to suspend judgment because it just doesn't work. In Washington, D.C., the company I'd worked for in San Francisco had its headquarters up in New Jersey. And they had wanted me to come back originally, but I felt called to go to D.C. And in those days it was, I didn't have a lot of possessions and you could pick up and move pretty easily. But I ended up going back to the company I worked for, and they gave me motivation to do so. In astrology, we have these maps that show you your power lines in the country. Some are better for career, some are better for relationships. And the East Coast, for me, of the U.S. has a kind of a get famous tone to it. So I had started the company as the lowest paid salesman, and when I left, I was the highest paid guy. I had this title that I had and various things of that nature, so why not go back? And I also felt, not to get too woo-woo, but what I would call on a karmic level, I felt like I kind of owed these people something. And they were in the red at the time that I went back to them. And so I worked as kind of a middle manager, title, all that, and we got them back into the black. And in the meantime, over several years, all the way back to San Francisco, I had been working on getting a ministry in an organization called Church of Dodich. Dodich is a Hebrew word that means universal brotherhood, and it wasn't Hebrew, it was a very metaphysical. I'm Catholic, I was born Catholic. So here I am back in New Jersey, playing corporate guy once again. And in the meantime, I had come through and got this ministry in this metaphysical church. And I felt like it's time to go live my ministry. So I quit the job. I moved to Santa Fe because I thought, Santa Fe is this real spiritual place. And it is, actually. And moved to Santa Fe and promptly went broke. I went through all my savings, all my everything, trying to, work a day job. Then I had a side job, and then I was trying to start my astrology practice on the side. And, the long story short, when we come to current events, I retired from the corporate world to be a metaphysical practitioner 3 times. Went broke all 3 times, but the difference is the 3rd time I just couldn't go back again. And so one of my retire from that world was going from New Jersey to Santa Fe, which was a very, very powerful experience for me. I got healthy walking around at 7,000 feet. I used to go hiking every Wednesday out. I'd pick a hike out in the beautiful New Mexico, and it really served to change my life, even though I ended up going to Florida after that to help my sister house sit for her while she went to Australia for her journey. And so it's just interesting that You see people going after their goal or after their dream and it fails. And then they have to go back, oh, I got to go back and get a job back in my suit again. And I did that 3 times. But the point is, I kept going, and, which has led me to where I'm at now.
Mark's inspiring story of self-actualization has gotten me thinking more about success lately. And I'd like to share with you another author who has helped shape my idea of what success looks like. His name is Dan Miller. He's the author of 48 Days to the Work You Love and No More Dreaded Mondays. I highly recommend both of his books and his podcast, the 48 Days podcast. I'll put a link to the podcast in the show notes. Both of Dan's books are available as audiobooks through Audible. And if you sign up today for a 1-month free trial at audibletrial.com/curmudgeon, you can download one for free. Audible is the internet's leading supplier of audio content and has over 150,000 titles to choose from. Visit audibletrial.com/curmudgeon for your free audiobook. Now let's get back to our interview with Mark Dodich.
Well, the first time I was in Alaska, as I was talking earlier, and the company that I went up to run was in much worse shape than I knew. And they were bankrupt in 6 months. So here I was with a one-way ticket to Alaska. I was the manager and running this company. And it just went out from under me. But what was left was, I was already doing astrology readings on the side. I had bought a little herbal business at that point in time to get me through. And, I was able to collect unemployment for a period of time. So I had this safety net. But, as all safety nets, eventually they go away. And that is when I left and went back to, as I said earlier, Washington, D.C., and had to take a real job because I had, when I was unemployed, I went through everything. I had cashed in my pension program, I cashed in my savings, and it was just like, well, you had to face reality is go get a job, And I've got that Midwestern work ethic, so, you're not going to, I'm not going to panhandle on the street. If I had to sweep floors, that's what I'll do. But I went back, got the corporate job. Then, as I said, I got my ministries degree, went out to Santa Fe and started practicing, had a day job selling radio advertising, went broke again. And that was a really hard one because I had to ask my parents for help financially. And, I kind of grew up in a family where you don't really ask for help, and I just, no, I'm not going to ask. And especially, Dad having his, death and rebirth and being disabled his whole life. I thought, no, I can't be asking for help here. But, when you push help away from you in life, it's not a surprise when you create a situation where you really need to get help. And I've learned that hard-headed part of me that says, you must do it yourself, you must pull yourself up by the bootstraps, man up, or whatever language you use, that at some point you need to be willing to receive help. And it's better to just do it from a conscious place than creating a situation in your life where, oh my God, I have to have help. So that was a big learning lesson for me in Santa Fe. Eventually, after Florida, I made it back to Portland, Oregon. I had never anticipated living in Portland. It was part of my sales territory when I lived in San Francisco, and it was like one of my least favorite places to ever come. And so here I was sitting in Florida. The aluminum company I worked for got downsized by 50%, and I was on the bottom half. And I'll tell you what, a good story that got me to Portland was they had called me from the company later on that evening and says, we made a mistake, we let too many people go. And they wanted to hire me, not let me go. And I says, well, I'll have to think on it overnight because first I'd be doing more work because they got rid of half the company and they were giving them a pay cut in order to get the company to survive. And so my joke I tell is the Grateful Dead got me to Portland, Oregon. And So what I did was I hopped in my car and I went out to one of the local ice cream places, and because I was trying to decide, do I go back to work or is that it? You leave. So I go and I have an ice cream, and as I'm fond of doing, is I talk to God in the mirror and I say, "Okay, God, what do you want me to do? I need a sign. I need to, because I'm a double Libra. My sun and moon are in Libra, and that's the most indecisive combination ever. I never want to go to a Chinese restaurant with me, to make a decision. So I'm thinking, oh God, what do I do? Do I take the safe bet and stay here and work harder for less money, or do I go off into the unknown, and what would that even look like?" And I says, "Okay, God, I need a sign." So I get back into my car with my ice cream, I turn on the radio, and the Grateful Dead come on immediately singing Truckin'. And I thought, oh, that's the sign, I gotta leave. So it was, and I pay attention to signs like that. I got lots of stories on animals bringing messages and, all of that is lots of stories. But the key was it was time to leave. And I did all my analysis, my astrology power lines of, I'll go live in Boulder, or I'll go live in Durango, or if all else fails, I'll end up back in San Francisco. Well, and I did all the analysis, and when if you've ever driven across the country, particularly if you've ever driven across Kansas, that's one of those places you try to get through as quick as you can, okay? And when you come across Kansas from the east to the west, you'll come up and you'll see the mountains about 100 miles out. They just pop out on a clear day, and it's amazing to think you can see that far. And the moment I saw that, I knew I wasn't going to live in Colorado. I mean, just instantaneously. But you couldn't have told me when I left that I wasn't going to live in Colorado again. So I end up coming up to Portland because I have a friend in acupuncture school here. My car breaks down. I had to put a $2,300 engine on a credit card. And you can't collect unemployment unless you have a physical address. So I had to get a physical address so I could collect unemployment so I could pay off the $2,300 credit card bill for the new engine. And in the meantime, I says, well, I'm just going to have to do something. I go back into the corporate world again. But that was the beginning of the end, because after about 4 years, I just couldn't stand it. I was making good money, but I just couldn't stand it anymore. I was sneaking home to take naps. As an outside salesman, I could do that. Didn't work Friday afternoons ever after a period of time. I just didn't feel good about myself trying to do something just for the money. My heart just wasn't in it. I mean, it was good at it. I did a good job with it. And then ultimately, you reach that breaking point that you just can't do it anymore. So I wouldn't say that I became a full-time astrologer out of any desire to be a full-time astrologer. It just kept coming and coming, and over all those years, it was the one thing that stayed with me. Even when I left, I was planning to start an import-export business, was taking classes, and I thought, well, I was able to collect unemployment when the job ended here in Portland, and I thought, well, I'll just bump my astrology practice up from part-time to a little bit more full-time while I'm trying to figure out what to do. And gradually, I'd go about all these job interviews, and I'd go home and I'd say, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it anymore. You get to, it's not a self-hatred, but it's like, oh, I just can't be that person anymore. And, the universe kept telling me, because I'd tune in and it'd say, you'll be able to make it. You'll be able to make it. Well, here I am in 2015 celebrating 20 years out of the corporate world. And I will tell you, though, I didn't go bankrupt, but I lost everything all 3 times I left to do this. The difference was the third time, I just couldn't stand to go back anymore. And that, and when you have no bridge behind you to go over anymore, your only way is forward. And that's how it played out. I will tell you that I genuinely feel called to do what I'm doing. I do, because there are better ways to make money, believe me. And I live a simple life. All my bills are paid. I'm comfortable. But the way I look at it today, and maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't look like I'll ever be able to retire. But I don't think I'm really the personality that ever would retire. And what I would tell people is that I work harder as a self-employed person than I ever worked when I worked for other people. And so you have to have a genuine love of what you do, a genuine get yourself out of bed in the morning and do what you need to do without somebody telling you to do it. Or it's not even worth starting, would be number one. But I love working with people. I feel like I'm the old country doctor, or I call it the shaman who lives out on the edge of town. I live out on the border of Portland, so because I can't deal with the thickness of all the traffic and noise. So, I kind of feel like there's this part of me that's really a monk in nature that, that I'd love to go off to my, my Tibetan monk hideaway kind of a place. But, I feel like I was born to work with people in this life, and it is genuinely rewarding, personally rewarding for me, to see people grow, and to live their dreams, or when they have to work through their divorces and their deaths and their cancers, and it gives me a lot of encouragement that humans are really strong beings. I mean, the things we are able to go through is pretty amazing, which, as I said earlier, I learned, through watching my father go through his death and rebirth experience. And I feel like if you really want to get down to it, why do I do it? I feel like there's a certain selfishness to it, because I feel like I'm a better person doing it. Because I will tell you, when you're working with people, and I don't ever tell anyone what to do, because they all know what to do innately. But when we're looking at options or things like that, I have to walk my own talk. Because when I do something that is in alignment with what I think is the highest truth, it comes back to me really quick. And so I don't know that that's the most enlightening way I can say that, but the truth is when you're working with people, and if you're not in your personal integrity, it comes back to bite you. And I have seen it with practitioners many, many times over the years. And so the work forces you to be a better human being, which, I mean, we all say we want to be a better human being, but the process is work. I will tell you that I had to reprogram everything. So I went from being a industrial salesman who had a base salary that was enough to pay all my bills, and then of course the commission was what I could live and have fun on, to going to no base salary, no guaranteed nothing, no paid vacations, no paid benefits, zero. You have to stand up and believe in yourself, to live that way. And it's scary. And I had to reprogram all the things I thought about the world, because when there's no safety net, you get to see where you're full of baloney and where you are in truth, because it's amplified, it's brighter. But I will tell you, the joy of feeling like, oh, I'm actually doing this. I actually set out to do this, and I'm actually doing it. Especially after failing 3 times, and I learned a long time ago, in the aluminum industry, I worked with a lot of small sign shops. And I would look at these guys and I think, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm smart, okay? And I'd look at some of these guys and I go, boy, this dumb son of a gun, how are they possibly making it, doing what they're doing? And I know that sounds a little arrogant, but truly some of these people you look at and you think, I don't know how this person is making this business work. And the truth was, as I learned, it wasn't how smart you were or your brilliance of ideas, it's persistence. You have to keep going. You get knocked down, you pick yourself up, you just keep going. And I learned that a lot of the really smart people, because I worked with a lot of inventors and scientists and that, And a lot of those guys had the intellectual knowledge, but they didn't have the common sense, practical knowledge that it takes to live day to day. And so what I've learned through my process for myself is I've had to combine, the ideas and the intellectual stuff with the practical, down to earth, humble. I do my own accounting, I do my own advertising. I had to learn how to, computers and me I can use them fairly well, but they're a struggle, And so I've had to learn how to do my own ads and things because you can't afford to just go pay everybody for every service that you do. And it's nice when you can, but you have to learn that self-reliant piece. And like I was saying with some of these people that I had judged as being not very smart, and many of them weren't. I mean, literally, I know it's terrible to say, but it's true. But they had the ability to keep going and put one foot in front of the next, and somehow they made it. And I saw some of the people who were brilliant fall flat on their face and never get back up again. So it's not the way you would think it would be, or at least not the way I thought it would be. But you genuinely have to feel called. I mean, your heart needs to be engaged in what you're doing. And I'm learning as I get older that it should be fun. Now, my fun is a very practical nature. I can go to an astrology conference. I have fun. I get to talk our weird language with all my friends. I get to learn something. The practical part gets a tax write-off because it's part of my business to go have fun. So my fun isn't your normal, let's go out to a bar and ha-ha fun like it was when I was 20. It's a practical fun. But I will say my heart's engaged in what I do. And if there's one thing, I see with people wanting to go out and start businesses, the ones who are doing it because they want to make money. Oh, I'm going to go get involved in this network multi-level marketing program for the money, but their heart's not in it. Guaranteed that's going down the tubes every time. Your heart has to be in what you do. So as I've starting to get older now, you start really thinking about that old bucket list thing. I wish I had started thinking about that bucket list before I got to the age where I had to start thinking about it. But, as you can tell from my stories, I traveled around the United States quite a lot after graduating college to current events. And, but really limited international travel. And I don't have the kind of bank account now that I can just go travel the world like some people do. Wish I did. So I thought, well, how can I do this? Well, I started putting on metaphysical trips. I took a group of people to Egypt. I took a group of people to Greece. And now once you get a taste of something you love to do that helps make what you do fun, you want more, And so I went to Italy with a group of friends, not the business, just a group of friends, and my knees were hurting. Italy doesn't believe in elevators, everything's a stair. And my knees paid the price. And I thought, it's not that you want to admit to getting older in life, but you do. And I don't want to say, oh my gosh, my knees could prevent me from doing what I need to do, or I'm going to have to go get knee replacements, is what they ultimately tell me. And I thought, well, I better really get on doing what I want to do, because I was going to take people back to a nice, soft Greece island trip, very easy. And I thought, well, African safari has been on my dream list for a long, long time, but it's too expensive. Oh God, nobody will want to come to Tanzania because they have yellow fever and you can't drink the water, and all the excuses why you can't do the thing you want to do. And everybody's got those kind of excuses. Doesn't have to be an Africa trip. It can be on many different levels. And so I thought, after this trip, well, Mark, your knees aren't going to get better until you have to replace them. You better do what you want to do. And you want to have fun doing it. So I thought, well, instead of taking the easy trip that I was going to do, that I knew would be safe and I knew enough people would come to cover my costs. It's not like I'm looking to make money on these things, but I'm looking to have fun and have a group of people that can tune in metaphysically to sacred sites, which is what I love to do. So I thought, I'm going to take the risk and do this trip that's like about double of what the cost would be of like going to Greece. And the adventure, and to be out with the big animals, the lions, and I love elephants. You know, I have foster elephants in Kenya. And I thought, why not give yourself this gift of creating something that is on your bucket list and you have every excuse in the world why you shouldn't do it, but you still want to. And so I figure, do it. What's the worst you could do is fail? Well, I've failed 3 times at this business, and now I'm out 20 years successful. You know, I've failed at a number of relationships, and, you know, I don't know, maybe I've given up on that one, but the key is I don't care if it's bigger than you think you can accomplish. If it's in your heart, my belief is it's the universe's job to fulfill your wishes. You have to be willing to open your heart large enough to be able to receive. And I don't care if that's me going to Africa or someone starting their own business or, you know, let's face it, we've all had to start over at one time or another in life, regardless of our social or economic status. It happens to everybody. And believe me, I've got clients who own their own jets. I've got clients who can't put 2 nickels together, you know? And it has nothing to do with how much you have or, oh, I have to wait until I win the lottery and then I can be charitable to this organization. The universe you don't bargain with the universe. It doesn't work that way. Basic metaphysical principles is you open your heart, you open to what it is you want to do, you take a tangible step for what that is going to be, and you follow through. That's how the universe works. You don't bargain. Oh, if I win the lottery, I'll do some good deed for somebody. No, it doesn't work that way.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast with Mark Dodich. I certainly have. If you have enjoyed this episode of the Curmudgeon Cafe podcast, I would love it if you visit Stitcher or iTunes and leave us a review. Let me know how we're doing. And of course, you can keep up with what's new on Facebook and Twitter at Curmudgeon Cafe. And I would encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. I post segments from the upcoming video as cafe clips every week. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. See you next week.